There are few reasons to still live on the islands in the northeast. The cold is one thing, but the creatures that inhabit the islands are a whole other ball of wax. They are always hungry, and when food is short they cannibalize each other. The same goes for the people that inhabit the town of Svartholmen. They are monsters, yet they used to be such hearty and peaceful folks. Svartholmen was once a place of worship and peace, but times have changed. Some wish to right the wrongs of the recent history, while others are looking to make a profit from its annihilation. Hello folks, and welcome to Dice Chatter. My name is Donnie, and today we continue our Frostgrave campaign with a couple new wizards we'll be adding into the mix. We have the wizard Nikolai, who is hoping to cleanse the lands, and of course the wizard Durgarith, who just wants to watch the world burn. Before we get into the game, we will cover the wizards, their spells, the warband they have hired, the scenario, and any other pregame shenanigans. So without further ado, let's dive in. Nikolai the Invoker is joined by his apprentice, Mike. Nikolai is an old and experienced man stuck in his ways, but shining some light on this wasteland of a world is not a bad thing at all. Nikolai will be focusing on the Thaumaturgy School of Magic. Some may even consider this the Holy Man's Mage. We shall see how that plays out on the tabletop. And then we have Durgarith the Demon, joined by his tiefling pal Terry. A polar opposite on the battlefield compared to the Holy Man. Durgarith will be focusing on the Summoner School of Magic. Minor demons, life-stealing, and going for the kill is Durgarith's plan on the table. For Nikolai's warband, we have a Barbarian, a Treasure Hunter, and a Crossbowman for the Special Soldiers, and a few Thieves and a couple Thugs to round out the 10-fighter list. For Durgarith, we have 2 strong Knights, an Infantryman, a few Thugs, and 2 Thieves to finish off the warband. Moving on over to the scenario we are playing today, in the Frostgrave 2nd edition book, we are playing The Worm Hunts. 5 treasures will be placed on the board according to the setup of this scenario. A handful of arrows should be popping up on the screen now to give you a general understanding of where they are located on the table. For the special rules, during each creature phase there is a chance a giant worm will explode out of the battlefield next to a treasure. If your warband manages to damage or kill the worm that appears, you get some much needed experience points. Just before the game begins, we do have some before game spells. Nikolai the Invoker will first roll an attempt to cast Awareness. This would grant a +2 bonus to initiative rolling, and he is looking for a 14 or higher, and fails the roll. His apprentice Mike will try as well, and no dice. Durgarith has one before game spell as well, and that is Reveal Secret, which would grant his warband some extra treasure rolls at the end of the game. This is a success on a 16 and fails. Terry will try as well, needing an 18, and unfortunately does not cast the spell as well. We will begin the game with an initiative roll to see who sets up first. Nikolai will be the blue die and Durgarith the red, and Nikolai wins the roll. I will begin to set up the warbands on each side of the table. Will a worm of great fear and importance show up on the battlefield? And which warband will be able to conquer the beast for fame and fortune? Let's find out right now. Turn 1 Wizard Phase. Nikolai's Thief will move right up the table and be in range of the treasure and pick it up. We will roll to see if any creatures appear on the battlefield, and on a 10+, we roll a 7 and no monster appears. Nikolai will take his next turn and attempt to cast Shield on the Treasure Hunter to his side. This is successful on a 10, but a 7 is rolled, and Nikolai will decide to empower the spell, taking 3 damage. The Treasure Hunter's armor is now up to 13. Nikolai will then just move up and end his turn being partially protected from this ruined home. The Treasure Hunter will go next and take his turn moving twice. He will snake his way around the board and get up near this central treasure. The final activation for Nikolai's wizard phase will be this purple thug. Will double move up and make his way to the central area of the board. After this move, this will complete Nikolai's go, and we move on over to Durgarith's wizard phase. The knight next to Durgarith will activate first and move slowly in that heavy armor. He moves his total 7.5 inches up the battlefield and ends his turn there. Durgarith will go next and use his first action to move up near the knight. Then Durgarith will attempt to cast Leap on the heavily armored ally. This spell is successful on an 8, and the spell is cast on a 19. The knight will be flung forward and be right next to the central treasure. To speed things up, both the infantryman and the thug nearby will both double move up the board awaiting further orders from the wizards. This will then move things over to Nikolai's apprentice phase. Mike, the apprentice, will go first and attempt to cast Enchant Weapon on the crossbowman's crossbow. This spell is successful on a 14, but fails it excessively with a 9. Mike chooses not to empower the spell and will take a point of damage. After this, he will move up the board into this rundown establishment. The thief will go next, take his full 7-inch move up to the treasure and pick it up. We'll roll to see if a creature appears on the board, and it looks like the monsters have been awoken. And unfortunately for Durgarith, the ever-dangerous Wraith appears right behind his band of fighters and thugs. This may change up a game plan or two. The crossbowman and the barbarian will decide to go next to finish off the turn. The crossbowman will make his way into the ruined building and perch himself right up atop these ruined stairs to get a good vantage point, while the barbarian will trudge forward, getting himself into the mix. After these moves, it is now Durgarith's apprentice phase. This thief will start things off by running forward and is able to pick up the treasure for his second action. On a 10+, another creature appears on the board, and nothing shows up on a 6. This will then end the thief's turn. Being a little nervous about this wraith, Terry the apprentice will attempt to cast Possess on the nearby knight, making him stronger and, more importantly, give out magical attacks. The spell casts on a 14, and Terry rolls a 12, but he will empower the spell, taking 2 points of damage. And this knight now hits harder, has better armor, and his attacks are considered magical. After this spell, Terry will just move up the board, giving the thief some support. After this, the thug will double move around the rock and farther up the board, while the possessed knight will make his way over to the wraith and get close enough so that the spectral anomaly will force combat. After these moves, we head over to Nikolai's soldier phase. This should be a pretty quick soldier phase for Nikolai. We have a thug and a thief who will decide to move up the board and get close to Nikolai and Mike, so that next round they can activate sooner in the round. After these moves, we transition over to Durgarith's soldier phase. Durgarith's soldier phase will be a little bit more exciting because this thief and thug will run forward. The thief, though, will be just in range of the treasure and pick it up. We will roll to see if some monsters appear, and one does. After a handful of dice rolls, it is determined an imp appears on Nikolai's starting side of the board. This may cause some issues for Nikolai's warband. Following this, we begin the creature phase. Now, before the creatures act, we must determine if the rumbling of a giant worm will erupt onto the battlefield. On a 12+, the worm arrives, but an 11 is rolled, maybe next round. Now on over to the wraith, who is in combat with the possessed knight. We have a +2 attack against the knight's boosted +6, and with a big roll, the knight easily handles the wraith and destroys the creature, granting some experience to Durgarith's team. Now on over to the imp, who will move up to the closest fighter it can see, and that is Mike the apprentice. Fortunately for Mike, it takes the imp 2 moves to get in range, and after this we end turn 1. To start turn 2, we will roll off to see who begins, and Durgarith looks like he will be going first. We start turn 2 with the wizard phase, and both of the thugs nearby Durgarith will begin to move up the board and attempt to get closer to the central treasure. The idea is to give the knight some backup when he picks up the treasure. Durgarith will go next and attempt to cast Summon Demon. This spell is successful on a 12, and he gets an 18. This means Durgarith is able to summon a more powerful demon, an Eldritch Eye Beast. This minor demon is forced to activate in the soldier phase, and Durgarith will move up to the portal steps and end his turn there. We now head over to Nikolai's wizard phase, where Nikolai will go first. He will adjust his position so that he is in line of sight of the thief carrying the treasure and the imp engaged with his apprentice. Nikolai will then attempt to cast Transpose on the two figures. This spell is successful on a 14+ and gets a 9. Nikolai will decide to empower the spell, taking 5 more damage but successfully switching the fighters. The purple thug will push into combat for free after the spell goes off, and then attack the imp. The thugs +2 fight against the imps +1, and the thug smacks the imp around, dealing 2 damage. This will end the thug's turn, and we move over to the thief here, who will move up and join the thug in combat with the imp. With an ally at the thief's side, we have a +3 fight against a +1, and once again the imp takes a hit, but this time it is enough to take the creature down. To finish off the phase, the thief that was transposed, who is carrying the treasure, will get as close as he can to the board's edge, and finish off the turn. Now we pop on over to Durgarith's apprentice phase. Terry will go first, move up on top of the ruins, and get in line of sight of the enemy treasure hunter. He will then attempt to cast Curse on the fighter. The spell goes off on a 12, and Terry gets exactly that. And the treasure hunter has -2 to all dice rolls now. After this, we move on over to the thief carrying the treasure, and this guy will just start high-tailing it out of here, getting near the board's edge this turn. After this, so begins Nikolai's apprentice phase. Mike will start things off and attempt the enchant weapon spell once again on the crossbowman. The spell is successful on a 14+, and a 15 will do. The crossbowman now has a +3 for its shooting attack. Mike will end his turn there, and the crossbowman will fire a shot at the enemy knight who is right next to the central treasure. We have a +3 shot against a +4 fight, and the bolt flies and slams under the knight's armor. He will end up taking 3 points of damage. The crossbowman will then just reload and move things over to his thug ally. This thug will have another simple turn and move forward up towards the central area of the battlefield, where all kinds of bloody things have occurred, and we will end the apprentice phase there. Durgarith's soldier phase is next, and the knight near the central treasure is going to pick it up. We will roll to see if any creatures appear, and on a 5, nothing happens. Unfortunately for the knight, he is slow and even slower with the treasure, and this is as far as he can go. To finish off the soldier phase for Durgarith, we will do a series of moves on the battlefield. Those with treasures will start making their way to the edge of the board, while anyone else able to move will head forward to aid the knight, and hope to block those fighters from Nikolai's warband who are closing in. After all of these moves, we head over to the opponent's soldier phase. For Nikolai, we will move the barbarian closer to the center of the board as well to hopefully help out his warband, and we will also move the thief carrying the treasure closer to the edge of the battlefield. After these two moves, the treasure hunter who is cursed will take a risk and move right up to the infantryman blocking the knight holding the treasure, and for his second action, he will attack in. A +1 for the hunter against the infantryman's +3, and the hunter is successful, dealing out 6 damage to the defender. After this combat, we end the soldier phase and hop on over to the creature phase. Now, there are no creatures on the board, but we will see if the giant worm appears on the battlefield this round. The worm appears on 11+, and with a 16, a giant worm shows up on the board. After randomly determining where the creature spawns, it once again is not good news for Nikolai, as the worm is ready to consume the thief right near the board's edge. This will then end turn 2. With the end of turn 2, we will see if the curse is lifted from the treasure hunter, and a will save of an 8 is not enough. After this, we have an initiative roll to see who starts things off. And I guess a 2 beats a 1, so Durgarith will start things off once again. We begin the wizard phase, and it should be a pretty quick one since no allies are within 3 inches of Durgarith. The demon wizard will attempt to cast Leap on the knight carrying the treasure. This spell is successful on an 8, and once again, it goes off. Durgarith will then just appropriately sit at this flaming portal and pass things over. For Nikolai's wizard phase, he needs to figure out a way to help the thief with the treasure, and Nikolai will first move in range of the worm, and then cast Push on the giant worm. The spell is successful on a 10, and Nikolai will empower it for 1, casting the spell. We then have a 10+ attack roll against a +4, and the worm is pushed 10 inches from the thief. Nice work there, Nikolai. This will then end the wizard phase, and Terry will be going next. The demonic apprentice will take his turn moving down from the ruins and get in line of sight of the enemy treasure hunter, and will then cast a spell, Steal Health. This spell goes off on a 14+, and Terry will empower the spell, having it pierce into the hunter's hit points, dealing 3 damage, while Terry only takes 1, due to the recouping of some health from the hunter himself. After this, the thug can just squeeze through the demon and his ally, join up with the infantry, and get into combat range. With the ally bonus, we have the thug's +4 against a +1, and with the big bonus, the thug actually ends up taking a point of damage. We now move on over to Nikolai's apprentice phase. Mike the apprentice will go first and scoot over to get in line of sight of the worm, and then attempt to cast Blinding Light on the monster. This succeeds on a 10, and the spell is cast. The worm now must roll a will save, and with a +5, the beast does not meet or beat 14. So for a duration, it is blinded. After this, the crossbowman will take a shot at the worm, and since the worm is in some terrain hindering the shot, it may be a little bit more difficult. The bolt flies with a +2 against a +0, and the crossbowman pierces in a whopping 11 damage into the worm. And in addition to the big hit, Nikolai also gains some experience for damaging the beast. This will end the apprentice phase, and things turn over to the soldier phase. Durgarith's warband will go, and the minor demon and the thug will group activate and get all up in the treasure hunter's combat range. The minor demon will then attack in, getting the companion bonus. We have a +7 against a +1, and the eye monster just annihilates the hunter, consuming him for his next meal, while the thug next to him will just stand there in shock. After that combat, a number of leftover fighters are going to make their way off the board, as Durgarith and his crew don't feel the need to stick around much longer. With these movements, Durgarith claims a total of 2 treasures. Now over to Nikolai's soldier phase, where his warband sees not much more reason to stick around as well. I will start moving fighters away from the center of the battle and make their way to the edge. After all of these moves, Nikolai manages to retrieve 1 treasure, and then we move over to the giant worm. Now, this giant worm is still blinded by the light, revved up like a deuce, and can't really run right, with a move of only 1 inch. He will make his way to the closest fighter, though, that he can see, which is the thief carrying the treasure, and the turn ends. The worm will now roll to see if blinding light wears off, and on a 2, nothing happens. Turn 3 is now no more. The battle seems to be winding down at this point, but the worm is still on the board, and Nikolai wants to take the beast out for that sweet, sweet experience. Without further ado, let's roll some initiative, which Durgarith goes first once again. So we begin turn 4 with the wizard phase. The knight will go first and simply make his way to the board's edge, and by quickly, I mean extremely slow, and will end things there. Durgarith will go next and is hoping to steal some life and experience by being cheeky. He will move down from the portal, get within line of sight and range of the worm, and cast Steal Health on the monster. This spell is successful on a 12, and a 14 will do it. This means the wizard deals damage and gains some needed experience points. After this, we turn things over to Nikolai's wizard phase. A really quick wizard phase here, as Nikolai doesn't see much to do, and he and his 2 soldiers will make their way off the board and await the exciting aftermath. Following this, we go to Durgarith's apprentice phase, where Terry is in the same boat and just starts heading for the board's edge, hopping off the battlefield. Now, onto the main event. The crossbowman is within range of Mike, the apprentice, to take the final shot at the giant worm. We have a +2 against a +0 once again, and the crossbowman is MVP and slams in enough damage to take out the worm. With the death of the giant worm and no more active combats, I see no reason to continue this game. Durgarith claims another treasure, which was the central treasure, and Nikolai claims another treasure chest as well. And of course, the rest of the fighters on the table survive this conflict. With the battle complete, we now move over to after-game activities. We will start off with Nikolai the Invoker. Since it is game 1 for him, he will choose a base of operations, and that location will be the temple. This gives a bonus to casting Miraculous Cure as well as a chance for a healing potion at the start of each game, which we will roll now. Nikolai needs a 16 plus and unfortunately does not get it. For his soldiers, he lost the Treasure Hunter. We will roll to see if he survives, and with that roll he is badly wounded and is forced to sit out the next game they play. Well, at least he isn't dead. In this battle, Nikolai managed to gain 215 experience points. He will spend 200 of those points to gain a point in health and make awareness easier to cast, raising him up to level 2. Nikolai's warband also managed to capture 2 treasures. The first treasure he found contained 20 gold crowns and a grimoire of enchant armor. The second treasure contained 20 gold crowns and 3 potions. The first potion is the amazing Elixir of Life, a poison potion, and a potion of healing. Nikolai will decide to keep his findings and save up some money for future purchases. Now over to Durgarith the Demon. Since it is game 1 for him, he will choose a base of operations, and that location will be the treasury. After each game, Durgarith can roll to see if he gets some extra gold crowns or even a treasure. We will roll for this game, and he receives an extra 13 gold crowns. Not bad. For his soldiers, he lost, well, no one. Good on you, you crazy devil. In this battle, Durgarith managed to gain 205 experience points. He will spend 200 of those points to gain a point in the fight stat and make Summon Demon easier to cast, raising him up to level 2. Durgarith's warband also managed to capture 3 treasures. The first treasure he found only contained 50 gold crowns. For the second treasure his warband discovered, it contained a whopping 300 gold crowns. Quite the increase in funds there. And finally, for the central treasure, inside was 40 more gold crowns and 2 potions. One potion was the rare Bottle of Null, and the other a potion of teleportation. So with a massive 403 gold crowns, Durgarith will upgrade his base by spending 400 of those gold crowns on a summoning circle and the summoning candle. This essentially means Durgarith can cast the Summon Demon spell before the game begins now, and with the addition of a +1 to the casting roll. Not a bad haul, Durgarith. So there you have it, folks, the second episode in our Frostgrave campaign. I'm really starting to love this game, and it may even be safe to say this is my personal favorite tabletop game of the year, and it's only March. If you enjoy this content, let me know by doing the socials, liking, commenting, and so on. Make sure to check out the Patreon and Discord for other fun stuff as well. Until next time, folks, I want to thank you all for watching, and of course, happy gaming.